Hey, good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
How are you, Braden?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you? What have you been up to lately?
Well, just hanging out here. Really, as you know, we've been pretty busy on this side, and I could already see. By the way, Braden, I could already see a couple people joining in on here. And once again, thank you all for coming out to Thinking About Magic live stream. But Braden, I got to tell you, it has been a busy week, and as you know, I started a project with Jonathan Molo, Andre Echave, and Mike Martinez on a project that we call the Magic Caros, and hopefully you get to see it sometime as well. And I'm going to put that in here. And what have you been up to, Braden?
Well, hey, I just want to say that the Magic Caros, I have seen the social media posts, and I know you guys had a big kickoff last week, so congratulations on that. For me, I have been up to, I'm going to be doing a lecture at the Dallas Magic Clubs coming up on May 17th. We'll be talking about creating inspirational business magic and how we can tie in business messages. Often with that type of audience, the message is sometimes more important than the magic. So I'm looking forward to that on the 17th in Dallas.
Well, that sounds good. And they could find all that information on your Facebook page, Braden?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And today we have a wonderful topic and some wonderful guests.
Yeah. And I can't wait to get to them. But before we go on to that, Braden, I know that we got a buddy out there. Nick Sorensen is out there, and he wants to say hi. And I do believe RV Bracia is out there. So hello to you wherever you guys are in the world. But now I'll leave it to you, Braden.
Thank you, Chris. We're so glad you're here today. Put in where you're from, where you're watching this show from tonight. And as always, if you're watching on the replay, we're on YouTube, so check us out there and put in where you're from on the YouTube, even in the in the replay. So we're looking forward to it. Today's topic is magic as theater, and we have two amazing guests that are going to talk about this topic as well as an upcoming convention to attend in August. So more information to come on that, details to follow. And I want to welcome our panelist, Napoleon Ryan. Napoleon is an actor and magician from London, and Napoleon moved to North America in 2010 and is now based in Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Napoleon. Yes.
Hi, guys. Hello.
Napoleon is our resident actor on the show, so we really appreciate your perspective in this conversation too. Yeah. Now, we're going to introduce our guests. She is an eclectic in her pursuits. She's a writer, an artist, a speaker, a creator, and a mnemonist. She co-created the Memory Arts series and created the highly acclaimed graphic download series on memory and learning, 3 Fundamentals of Mnemonics. She believes passionately in the role of effective memory and learning and advocates for improvements to how memory and the arts are incorporated in school curriculum. He is famous for creating some of the greatest magic effects of modern history. Card-Toon, Hold It Buster, Starcle, and The Awakening. He's also made TV appearances nationally and internationally and has worked behind the scenes as a consultant for many of today's top professionals, including Jeff McBride, Kevin James, Keith Berry, and David Copperfield. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the program SarahElla Phant Dan Harlan.
Hello.
Welcome. Well, today's topic is magic as theater. So we'll start there. What is magic as theater from your perspective? We'll begin with Sarah and work to Dan and go to Napoleon.
So to me, we all are performers and we often think of our magic just from a perspective of the tricks, but it's so important that when we think about ourselves on stage or performing even to a small group of people, that we really think about the purpose and the story that we're telling and what goes in, what other elements we're adding besides just the trick and the effect. I have a background in theater, and so I'm always trying to find ways to take my performance to the next level by adding an element of storytelling with purpose and a driving action that pushes you through the entire arc of the effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to know what I think, whether people care or not what I think, but what I think is there is no magic that is not theater, because we're doing performance magic. Now, technically speaking, you could do ritual magic, or you might believe that there's real magic, but as far as we are talking about, we are performance magicians. So we know that there's a secret behind what we do. There is a special effect to it. There is something that has to be hidden. There are things that have to be, shown to an audience. And so understanding that it is a theatrical art to begin with is critically important, being able to perform it properly.
Wonderful. And Napoleon, what's your perspective?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I agree with all that. I would say, magic as theater, some forms of theater are particularly like, I suppose, realist theater or 19th century theater. It's like the audience is watching something in an aquarium. They're watching all these actors on stage, and the actors are working sideways to each other. But magic, we're working out to the audience. So for me, the theater of magic is about connecting with the audience and playing with the audience and performing with the audience. You can perform to the audience, but in magic, you have the opportunity, like in stand-up or sketch comedy almost, to perform with the audience and make that strong connection. And I think also,
and Napoleon, if you don't mind me interjecting here, because it's like immersive theater or experiential theater, and there are lots of different versions of that. One of the simplest ones, from my background, is the haunted house idea.
Yeah,
where you have the audience walk through, and the scenes are set, but they're part of that. They're invited to interact with it, and of course, they invest themselves in the fact that it's fake, but they're still scared by it. So magic, your audience knows that it's not real, but they're still amazed. So I think it's got
become characters in your play, that they aren't just the audience member. They have a very important purpose too. And once you actually script them into your piece of theater and your work and think of them as participants and characters and actors along with you, it really makes for a unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
What can magicians learn from theater? I mean, what does the theater teach us to be? How does the theater teach us to be better magicians?
Well, I'm always going to come back to the foundation of theater, and that is scripting. The foundation is having an understanding of the story that you want to tell. Now, in most cases, and in the best cases, you have a very specific script to follow. The script has been determined to begin with, and that is why we have classics of theater that are fully scripted. They can be interpreted in different ways. It's just like a piece of music where you know that the notes are the way that they are, but a player can, they can emote through that. So it's the same thing with a script. All of the scripts that are in existence for all of recorded theater can be interpreted by players, directors, anyone that wants to take on that piece. But for me, it always comes back to having a script, even if you aren't working from one that is written. If you just have a premise, if you are doing, extemporaneous improvisation, jazz, if you're doing something like that, you still have to have an understanding of what a script is as a foundation to be able to come back and have a touchstone to play off of. I often do a lot of jazz magic when I'm just out in casual situations, but I always know what the point is that I'm going to be bringing back, and I'm able to improv if somebody gives me, a situation and some kind of a trick to do it with and a style to work it in. You can combine those things together and you can create something interesting, but it all comes down to that foundation of understanding how to tell a story through scripting.
And specifically, when you think about memorizing a script or learning the script or wanting to know why the biggest thing I took away from theater school was how to actually go through and learn my part. And one of the things that my professor would have me do is break every single bit of dialogue into these tiny chunks and write an action word and a purpose behind the words that you're saying. And every single like even, 5 words at a time. Each of those words has a very important purpose. And playwrights, they really think about the language that they use and the language that their characters use. And I think that we as magicians have to think just as carefully about the words that we use when we're on stage and when we're performing, so that every little bit of text, every move, every action has a reason behind it and a purpose behind it. And if it doesn't, we should take it out or we should rework it. And not only will that help learn your routine and make your routine stronger and better because you'll have a reason behind everything, it'll make it a better show for everyone to follow along, because every single tiny bit, movements and non-movements and inflection and all of that has purpose and reason behind it, and has been thought about. And
and
decisions have been made.
I've had consultants on my show change a single word and make all the difference.
It can be such a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, based on what you said, with the effects, magic trick is very much like an effect. It would almost be like a great special effects artist taking, well, I can make something explode and I can make something disappear, and I can string those things together, but I don't know why I'm doing it. There's no character I'm doing it to. There's no motive. Some of the great filmmakers of our time, like Alfred Hitchcock, for example, a lot of the scripts were adapted from books. So they started with this base of great material. And if you look at the theatrical plays that have stood the test of time, those are great baselines of material. And then you add all the special effects later. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what you need, so you a drastic change between them that can't be connected logically. That is the nature of magic. There's something has to happen from a place that you understand to another place that you can grasp, but you can't logically connect those two places. That is just a special effect. That is just something that happens. You can't attribute it to anything. What you need as a magician, as a theatrical magician, as an entertainer, is to have context. So it's the same kind of an idea when, for Alfred Hitchcock, since you brought him up, he's the master of suspense. So suspense has to have context. You have to understand why it's suspenseful. If you're lingering on a shot for a long time, like if you're looking at, and one of my favorite examples is one of the examples that is used typically in film school for talking about Alfred Hitchcock, and that is the scene where there's a bomb under a table. So he spends 2 minutes under the table looking at the bomb while there's dialogue going on top. Now, if you were to just come into that and there's no dialogue, all you're looking at is a clock ticking down with a bomb under a table. Now, that it's interesting. Most magic is interesting. You're like, well, why is that? Obviously, it's a bomb. It's ticking down. It's going to explode. That's interesting. But the way that is used in the scene in context is that it begins with a simple dialogue of 2 people in a diner above the table, and they're just talking to one another. And then the camera slowly pans down and now lingers on the bomb while you hear the conversation going on. That's what creates the suspense, is that you know that they don't know. And they're just having a very casual conversation. And in your mind, you're going, oh my God, when is this going to end? And who's going to figure it out? And all that. So, suspense is very challenging to create. And he was the master of it. And I try, you know that I've talked about this in my own magic. I try to create for my audience the no way moment where they say, no way. And I want them to actually say it. Every show that I do, you've heard it, I get the audience to say no way. Now,
or other things.
Because I'm actually going for this response. Oh, right? You're right. I'm going for that response. But most of the time I'll hear a no way. I'll hear somebody else go, oh, that kind of thing. but I always create that because I do a little foreshadowing of what's going to happen. And then I pause just before I go into that moment where I'm going to show them it's already happened. And then you'll get it every time. So, and I learned that from Alfred Hitchcock.
And the value of a pause.
The value of the pause.
Taking a slowing down and breathing and letting the audience enjoy every single moment and catch up. Because so often they're running through everything in their mind. They're seeing it for the first time, and it might be something we've practiced over and over again. So often, I think it is important to actually have in your script, breathe, slow down, or pause dramatically.
And it's so fun as a performer when you know that the ending is already done. It's already done, and now I'm just having some fun with somebody, and basically I'm coasting. I'm taking my time, and then I turn that attention. I focus the attention on something that's already done, but there's no possible way in their mind that it could exist in the way that I'm starting to tell them that it exists. So I can take my time unfolding it. And when I say take my time, obviously, when you first script these moments, you're going to have way too many details. But go back and think about that Alfred Hitchcock moment. All you do is establish. There's an establishing shot, and then there's this slow fade to what's actually going on. And if you think about that in your mind, you won't take too much time describing it, And it's the same kind of thing for the effects that I do. I already know what I'm about to show someone, that it's already true. And I just want them to slowly understand that it is. And they'll fight against it. The audience will fight against that realization. And that's what makes them go, no way. Right? And as soon as they say that, you realize that you have actually established a magical situation. When they say no way, what they're saying is it's impossible. It can't be true. And now you show them it's true. So that's what you're looking for. I think that's what you're trying to grasp as a magician. If you can get the audience to collectively go, it's not going to happen. It hasn't already happened. It couldn't possibly be.
Take them on that journey.
Yeah.
And that moment doesn't come necessarily from the trick itself. It comes from all of the scripting and the blocking and the body language. And I'm sure you've experimented with taking it too long, and you lose that, and you have to figure out where that boundary is. Where how far can I take it without?
I will tell you, Braden, that most of the time I've found that in understanding it, most of the time I've found that I don't leave enough time. I'm like most of us. I think most magicians, I've already accomplished the trick. Let me just snap my fingers and show you the card. Let's just get to the end, right? And that's fine. That's a shock. A shock is different from suspense. And bringing it back to the analogy that I used to begin with, the haunted house analogy, you want a mixture of both. You want shocks, you want scares, you want jump scares, you want loud noises, you want crashing, you want that kind of stuff. But you also want suspense. And most people don't understand building that. You want to create a moment where people are feeling uneasy.
Have such a habit of wanting to rush through things. Again, I think we practice it over and over again, so we know what's going to happen. We know what to expect, and we don't just take time to really slow down. And that's one thing. When I worked with my son's an actor, and when I've worked with other students in acting, if you practice a monologue and you're ready for it, when you go in to deliver that monologue, go extra slow in your mind, because you might feel like you're being incredibly slow. But what you're really doing is you're giving people time to think and react and to take it in. And so you don't have to rush through your lines and rush through your pattern, rush through the moves and what you're doing. That the audience really is kind of craving you to be that down to earth, slow level presence.
Yes, and just talking about acting in general, acting is reacting. So you have to feel off of who you're playing to, and you can't do that without a premise and without a purpose. So that's why I established that. And I like the interplay with my helpers and myself, whoever's participating, and myself. And so I give them space. An actor allows everyone else to have space. And during those quiet moments, reacts.
And you listen.
And listen. Absolutely.
Listening is so important. You can get so much from an audience. And the more you perform something and you listen to and get that feedback from your audience, you'll learn where those moments are, where you could take more time or where you could add in that extra element of suspense. Yeah. Because audiences are usually, they're good at letting you know what they want and what they're enjoying. And if you just take time to take in their response and really learn from your audience each time you perform something, your show can really evolve.
Yeah, and you also have to remember as a magician that you are creating an unsettling situation all the time. So you have to reassure people that they know what the situation is. You have to ask them occasionally, so you're certain that you've done this, and because you've done this, it's a certain way. And as soon as they agree to that, then you're allowed to show them that you've changed it drastically. You know, so you have to convince them of the initial condition before you alter it. And a lot of magicians go so quickly that audiences miss, well, was it actually this way? Was it that way? Has it changed? I don't remember. It creates confusion, and confusion is not magic. They have to be absolutely certain that the situation is the way that it is. And then you take them on this journey that challenges their perception of this situation.
You have to slow down and make sure you're not communicating too many messages.
Yeah.
Wonderful thoughts and tips here and great discussion. I'm going to go to Napoleon here. You've been listening in, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on this topic as well. And I've got some follow-ups after that.
Brilliant. Yeah. So, I totally agree. I think some other things that we can take or we can learn from theatre, aside from like maybe the set dressing and the visuals and the scenery and all the special effects, which you may not be able to do in a street show or a kid's birthday party. But you can take the visual elements, you can take the scripting. The things that I also would take from theatre are things like narrative structure, building to some kind of climax, some kind of plot in your show. Usually mentalists might end their show with a prediction that refers back to other things that happened in the show earlier. I think also variety of structure. When you go and see a play or a musical, for example, there are usually a lot of scene changes. Or a Shakespeare play, you might have lots of different scenes in different parts of a castle or different parts of a land. Or you might see a play where there's only one setting. And so in that sense, you wouldn't necessarily have variety in terms of the visual structure of what you're seeing. You might have more variety in terms of the emotional structure of the characters. And that leads me on to the third thing that you might take from theatre into your magic shows is an exploration of character. Your persona on stage can be what the audience sees is what they get. Or it could be something where it's more nuanced and you reveal something during your show. So for example, there was a very good series of CDs it's an interview between Nick Lewin and Billy McComb. And Billy McComb was talking about sort of exploring the character. And, sometimes it's not appropriate, perhaps, if you're doing something where you're like an MC, you're a patter act, you're talking to the audience, and you've got 20 minutes. You don't probably have as much time to reveal your character through action in the same way that Hamlet reveals his character in Hamlet through 5 acts of the play. But, in 20 minutes, you can have a revelation of your character he was talking about. So at the end of his life, Billy McComb would sort of shuffle onto stage and make some jokes about having sort of almost escaped from a nursing home. He wanted to get back there for his rice pudding. And so the audience might think, oh, who's this guy? We thought we were going to see a magician. Who's this old guy who's just come on the stage? And then obviously within those 20 minutes, you'll see this complete transformation in your perception about him, because obviously he's doing some amazing magic. Similarly, I remember seeing a Zoom show at the Magic Castle where Andy Diemer did a wonderful performance using his space and using the sort of theatricality of Zoom magic, where he started off and you thought he was playing some children's entertainer. And then suddenly the backdrop fell down and he addressed the camera. He seemed very happy, but then suddenly he became this sort of very paranoid conspiracy theory type of magician, and he completely subverted what we thought we were in for, and then explored the character from there. So I think generally a lot of times magicians, we portray the magician as Superman, this idea that we can do anything. Even if we don't say that to the audience, our actions suggest that we are capable to do all these amazing things and break the laws of physics and all that sort of thing. But I think sometimes we don't explore perhaps our vulnerabilities, or the things that we can't do, or the things that I can do this, but I'm not sure I can do this. And so I think maybe in our shows, one thing that we can take from theatre is perhaps exploring the limits of our character or our persona that we're portraying.
Well, I gotta jump in there real quick. We lost Dan and Sarah because I was just informed that a storm rolled in, so the drama keeps rolling here.
There you go.
Wonderful.
And trust
the tempest.
Yes. So this is nothing. This isn't part of the whole theme, everyone. So this is not part of Magicus Theater. There was really a storm, and so I'm kind of talking to them on message here. They're gonna try to come back, but nonetheless, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But they say it's a big storm, and the whole power out just came on. But before we go on, Brady, I want to just say that I was taking a lot of notes as we were going on, and this is like a master class. So if you guys are just jumping on out there, I think it'll be a good idea to watch. Now, I'm gonna jump off screen real quick because they're messaging me, and I'm gonna go figure out what's happening, Braden. So I'll leave it to you, Napoleon.
All right.
May I just carry on for a second, since I can, just filling in time. So I was at the Magic Castle this week. I was lucky enough to see Tina Leonard performing her classic and celebrated Mop Man routine. And it was really interesting sitting in the audience. I mean, it was a great show. There were other acts in this particular show in the Palace of Mystery. And what I noticed watching the show, was fantastic, but watching the audience. Now, Tina Leonard, she does a kind of dramatic scenario where she plays a cleaning lady who, feels a little bit oppressed, perhaps, and she's not really enjoying life. And then suddenly, magically, her mop comes to life and becomes this romantic and suave magician. I was talking about Mop Man, Tina Leonard's wonderful piece of theatre, magic theatre. And it's just very interesting because by having that narrative in the piece, I think in a way, the audience were much more attentive. They obviously were attentive to all the other parts of magic in this particular show at the Magic Castle. But because there was a story, it somehow resonated on a deeper emotional level. And so sometimes when people watch magic, there's that moment of complete surprise and wonder. And then perhaps the rational brain kicks back in again and they're thinking, oh, how did he do that? They may not say it, but they're thinking that. But it was very interesting the way that creating narrative for her whole act, in a way, kind of subverted any wish by the audience to really want to, to pick away at it rationally at what she was doing. And it's kind of the same with Chris' act as well when he's playing Faust, which I've seen. I think playing a character and showing the character's struggle and vulnerability and his narrative, it's sort of, I think the audience forgets they're watching magic in a way. They do see magic, but they forget kind of to be analytical about it.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here, Braden. I just want to say we got Sarah.
Because we might.
So here they are.
That's right, Chris. I think I'm going to say the same thing that you're saying. We have a storm raging outside. So I mean, it's.
So
if that storm continues to knock out our power, let me try to get in my comments on Tina Leonard very quickly. Absolutely fantastic act. Here's what happens when you have a script and when you are doing something dramatically like that. Either the audience doesn't try to figure it out, which is really nice. They just sit back, they relax, they enjoy the theater of it, and it's a beautiful experience. Or they do figure it out and they don't care. They still enjoy the experience. It won't matter if they are able to figure out how you do it, as long as you're connecting with them on a different level. The problem with most magic is that it only has one level. Most magic is like a mud puddle. It's shallow, but mysterious. What you want is you want to have something deeper than that. You want to have layers to it. You want to have depth. You want to have interest. You want to have people that go deeper. You want to have them dive with you to an interesting location. You want to show them scenery they've never seen, that kind of thing. And it doesn't matter whether you've created that, which you probably have if you planned, where you have, and they can say, oh, this is artificial reef, it's been built on this or whatever. They can use their analytical brain all they want to, but it's still beautiful. That's what you want to eventually achieve. But to be able to do that, you have to connect with people. And to be able to connect with people dramatically, you have to have some kind of premise. You have to build a meaning, and it doesn't have to be a big meaning. I'm not talking about storytelling. Storytelling is great, but you have to have at least some reason why you're doing what you're doing. And so for Tina Leonard, the reason she does what she does is that she is a lonely cleaning woman in search of a romantic, magical connection. And that's it. It explains the whole thing. And then she just extrapolates that so that the whole thing becomes beautiful.
Now, if you had to rate the different disciplines that are involved with theater. So, for example, we've discussed scripting, we've discussed character, we've discussed premise a little bit there. There's also lighting and maybe music. Let's go with those. And each of them, and I didn't even really talk about acting itself. So that's like another one. But they're all disciplines in and of themselves. If you were talking to a magician who's just starting out, where should they focus their time and energy? Because I think some people think magic is theater and they think I need lighting and sound.
Well, I think the first thing, they have to have premise. They have to have a reason, a purpose and a reason why. They have to be able to answer. I talk about answering that on a macro to micro. So why am I a magician? And then why am I showing this effect? And then within that effect, why am I doing this? Why does this come next? Why is this next? And then why do I do this? And then taking down to every single little move that you do, or even the hidden moves. Movement is so important in magic, especially when you're talking about sleight of hand and manipulation, that even the times that you're not moving and where your attention goes, all of those things need to have a why behind them. To use Dan as an example, he was lecturing the other day and was talking just about the importance of looking in your pocket when you go to take a pen out that's not actually there, that you look there and then you look there. And the difference that it makes for if you reach in your pocket without looking, to looking in your pocket while you're reaching into your pocket, just that glance makes a huge difference. And so purpose and premise and the motivating reason behind what you're doing has so many different levels, and it's such an important piece of magic. And it really goes into, talked about acting and scripting and all of that. If you don't have a purpose or reason behind presenting what you're presenting, it's all pointless.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, because I did the whole Tarbell project. I did every single trick from Tarbell. And there were a couple of times that I came across this phrase. And the phrase was, you conceal something in your hand and it will go unnoticed by the audience. And that is bullshit. So, right, you can't just conceal something in your hand and it goes unnoticed. If you conceal something in your hand, the audience notices it because your attention is on concealing the thing in your hand. That's just the way it is. What you have to do at the very micro level is you have to conceal something in your hand, and your hand has to be motivated to be in the position that it's in. It's the whole reason that a magic wand was invented. So you have a magic wand, under here, and you conceal something in your hand, but you grab a magic wand. That covers the concealment. It's the whole reason that was created. Understanding that you can't just have a hand on its own that has something in it and think the audience won't look at it. That's the first place they'll look, because you're thinking about it, because there's no reason for your hand to be here or down there or whatever. I mean, at the very, very least, you have to figure out why your hand is in the position it's in. Now, honestly, that's not talking directly to the question about theatrically what's important, but we're talking about the deceptiveness of magic as it relates to theater. So I think at the very base level, even before you think about theater, you do have to think about motivating mechanically the actions. And that is a blocking technique. So it's related. I mean, it's part of theater. So honestly, let's say that blocking is the most important part when it comes to being a magician in theater. Your physical movements must be motivated. They must look natural. So if you think about magic as theater, every action that you do has to be motivated in some way. And it's very important because I see a lot of magicians that are pretty good, but they will move randomly on the stage. They will be erratic in their movements. And that's unsettling to an audience in a bad way. It's unprofessional. You want to be very specific. You want to make sure that you have ergonomics on your side. Well, that's the science of the minimization of movement to reserve energy. So ergonomics. So think about that. But it's blocking of every single possible movement that you could do in the entire procedure. So if you have to be on the other side of the stage, you have to motivate that cross in some way. If you have to pick something up, you have to be in the right place, and it has to be in the right place at the base level.
The strongest theater is theater that all of your purposes are in alignment.
Yes.
That all of your tiny reasons for doing things have something to do with your overarching purpose and your big goal, your big reason for the effect or for your show or for yourself as a performer.
Mm-hmm. And let's give a great example, because this doesn't just speak to stage magic. This is also important for close-up magic. The reason that Slidini was and is considered the master of close-up misdirection is blocking. The reason that he is the eminent master, the guy that was the best, is because he blocked all of his actions. Every single action was motivated, and it was exactly the right time and the right place every single time. And if you watch performances of him, if you've studied Slidini, you know that that's absolutely true. He would never, ever do an action that seemed out of place. And he was doing incredible things. His lapping and retrieving from the laps were absolutely amazing. His palms and pickups and his drops, absolutely amazing. It's all blocking. And then beyond that, of course, he creates this mystery of the theater, and he's got interesting sounds and motions, and he does the double check with the audience where he's like, do you believe it's here? And do you think it's there? And is this what you see? All of these things, but it comes down to physically knowing specifically what you're going to do and making that deceptive and natural.
Making decisions.
Yep.
Purposeful decisions.
Yep.
Sarah and Dan, you've blown my mind. This is fantastic. This is so good. Now, what we're going to do is go to the audience watching on social. Go ahead, Chris, and pull up some comments. We've got a lot of folks and friends watching tonight. Yeah,
we do. We do have a lot of folks. The first one is Daryl. Daryl says you have to, I think he wants to add his thoughts. You have to remember what is about the effect that you were amazed with when you first saw it, and allow your audience the time to have that same experience, no matter how many times you perform it.
Oh, yeah.
And then here's Tim Converse. Magicians aren't often afraid to explore their vulnerable side because they think of themselves as too powerful to be vulnerable. Great point, Tim. And then we have Glenn. I know him personally. He's out there in the Philippines, so he's up early. So hopefully get some rest soon. And then one last one here, Dan and Sarah. Another one from him. Yeah, I think he wanted to add, you don't have to tell your audience your whole backstory, but if you know it, when it will inform your actions and premise. And
and Tim's he's an old friend of mine as well. So good to see you, Tim. And he understands it. See, the easiest way to establish a premise, to have a reason for your magic, is to talk about what's real, what's actually happening in your life. And it doesn't matter what it is, you can draw from your own experience. And so part of Magic is Theater is understanding that theater is reality seen through a lens, that it's the perfection of reality, or the imperfection of reality, or the fantasy of reality, or the science of reality. It's emotions, it's interactions. So your own experiences will be able to inform what you perform.
Go ahead, Napoleon. Yes.
Sorry. There you go. Yeah, I was just going to say about, I just make a little claim for acting, because acting is kind of motivated in the same way that blocking is motivated moving action and moving things around. Acting is motivated thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
And so obviously, if you're studying acting, you begin to start thinking about why you're doing everything, the rationale for everything you're doing. I mean, if you're playing a character in a narrative play, obviously you're thinking about why you're doing this action, why you're going to murder the king, or whatever it may be. And with magic, obviously, it's the same thing. It's just obviously, your other actors are props or people in the audience. And the other thing I'd say about acting that's very useful is that audiences mirror your energy. So if you're very excited, that often can translate into the audience. So if you're surprised by the revelation of whatever it is, or you don't think it's going to work, and then suddenly it does work, the audience often mirror your reaction. So if you have a climax and you give it nothing emotionally, then the audience may give it nothing too, and you may find that they don't really applaud. But if you're giving it big energy, or energy that's appropriate for whatever you're trying to achieve, the audience will mirror that, and that really comes from just acting and practicing and emotionally different faces, different facial reactions, different thoughts, are how they manifest in your face or your body language. But the audience will go there for sure if you kind of give them permission to mirror you, if you're willing to sort of put that out there.
The audience is looking to the performer to tell them how to react oftentimes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking to the magician to let them know, should I be excited about this, or is there more, or is this really how it's supposed to work?
And often they need that permission.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's a challenge in acting to have that energy level as though it's new. You have to believe that it's new every
First
time.
First
time it's ever happened.
You've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. And if you believe in the magic, they believe in the magic as well. Even if it's momentarily, they believe in that moment that you've created. Even if afterwards they might analyze it or go away and try and work it out. In that moment, they're there with you.
If I could jump in real quick there, everyone, I just wanted to throw this comment out there, Braden, if you don't mind. Christopher Stonewick says, if it hasn't already been mentioned, get Dan's More Than Meets the Eye publication. It is the best $15 you'll ever spend. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. It will definitely help you. It talks a little bit about this, but it also talks about structure, how you can put together an entire act. I mean, it's more than meets the eye. It's all the stuff that's behind the scenes that the audience doesn't see. It's really the important stuff, foundational. It's what we're talking about, motivation and scripting and premise and all of that kind of stuff. Now, just very briefly, when I say that blocking is the most important part, I mean that if you don't have that, you don't have the minimum requirement. You do not have the minimum requirement to enter the field. If you haven't thought about blocking as a magician, you are not qualified to perform.
You're not a magician.
That's it. That's it. You're just not qualified to perform. You have to at least be proficient in your actions. That's what magic is about, proficiency in actions. And it's like most physical entertainment. A dancer has to have that. A musician has to have that. You've got to get physically proper with your scales, your movements, your, all that stuff. Whatever art you're in, your brush strokes, it's the minimum requirement. Beyond that, script. Do your script. Come on, work it out.
Now, when it comes to our act and having that moment where we have to believe in it all over again, and you've had a career, and so maybe you can give some tips on how do you keep that moment fresh for every piece in your show? Is there do you switch things out? I mean, there's got to be times where it's like, oh, I'm going through the list. I'm doing that again. Okay, I'm doing that. You have tips on that? That's great.
Well, I take a great delight in the way that I've constructed things, so that when it comes to those moments, I'm already feeling really happy because I know that I've constructed them in such a way that they're not perceived by the audience. So I'm 5 minutes ahead, or I'm 2 minutes ahead, or whatever, however far ahead I am from the audience. And my delight happens there. So it helps to raise my energy. When I know that my ending is there, when it's, and a lot of my things, and you've seen them, they begin by me demonstrating that the ending can't happen. And then the moment that I'm done with demonstrating it, it's already done. So I've already established it. So now I've got 3 minutes of play. I've got 3 minutes of time. I've got 3 minutes of enjoyment. And so I can focus that on the interaction. And very briefly, I will talk about this so that you understand what that means. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Most magicians don't talk about what that means, but the beginning is establishing the premise, the players, the props, and that all happens here. The ending is the resolution. It's over there. It's like two pillars of a bridge. But in between those, this is what the audience remembers. So it's this action. It's stuff that I talk about here. So it's principal action in a sense. So the principal action is the story. So what I do is I invite the audience into that story, and I establish this premise, and I establish this what the props are and how we're going to interact and why it matters. And now I take them on this journey, and it's the part that they remember. And if I've done my job properly, that is entertainment. That is the thing that they care about. I want them to know what the ending is, but believe that it's impossible. I want them to anticipate it. I want to create the proper amount of foreshadowing and suspense and everything for the ending. And this entire process can happen, in 30 seconds. It can happen over 7 minutes. It's however you want to do it, but those are the important things to think about. So for me to make it fresh every time, it's the fact that I've firmly established this pillar, and now it's the interaction. And it's
play with the audience.
You get to play.
Yeah.
It's new and different.
And because every time you're performing it, you have a different audience.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have different reactions, and it's going to be a different experience. And so not being afraid of the audience and not being afraid to involve the audience and allowing them to inform your show. And so that you're not just on autopilot, but you're receiving feedback from them, and it becomes a conversation with the audience instead of just a monologue.
I will talk briefly, again, just a couple of statements about performing to a camera. I always imagine that on the other side of the camera is a young me, a child that I was, that knew nothing. And I try to perform as well as I can to interest that human, whoever that is. So and that should reach everybody, because it's the innocent mind that you're trying to reach. And so when I work through a camera, it's when I perform and when I teach and I don't get feedback, I try to think of what would I want to see if I didn't know what this was all about? What would be new to me, new and fresh?
Now, what we'll do is we can talk about this all day. I mean, this is just fantastic. And I do have one last question before we do final thoughts. So I do have one last question. I'd like to pose it to everyone here on the call, even you, Chris. And it's specific maybe to magic, but I would love your perspectives from each of your perspectives on this, because it may be unique to magic, but there might be different perspectives on how to handle it. And that question is, what's your advice or your thoughts on transitioning between effects? Transitioning from one piece to another. And Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think I keep going back to purpose. But if you've established that macro purpose, that big purpose about why am I doing what I'm doing, then when you are putting your effects together into a show, you have purpose between why this goes first and then why I'm telling this part of the story and then why I'm telling this part of the story. And I think if you put thought into it, thinking about that overarching purpose and reason, and so there is thought, and you're not just throwing one trick after another, but really have thought about why this goes here, then that transition kind of comes naturally. And you'll find that you automatically, that one just automatically transitions straight into the other without needing a huge, monologue or anything explaining why this now I'm going to do this, or now we'll, if you thought about it from the beginning and you've really put planning into what you're performing, when there shouldn't be a huge transition between effects.
Yeah, and that's also in More Than Meets the Eye, that same concept. And I do give you a basic outline of an entire show and what each piece should mean. And it's basically it's a formula. So formula, occasionally in entertainment, formula gets a bad rap, but it doesn't deserve it. Formula is what drives all modern entertainment, all popular things. Your songs, your sporting events, your Netflix, your Hulu. Every single show that you love is formula, and it's put in there. And then when you break from the formula, that means that you understand the formula and you can do something different. But I give that whole outline as to this one means this, and that one means that, and so on and so forth. For myself, I like my pieces to stand alone so that I can slot them in based on how I want the audience to perceive them, because I have way too many pieces. As a prolific artist, you're going to have more art than you can possibly do in a single session. So you have to understand that. If you want to be really, really good and work for any audience, you're going to have more than you can show at any one time. So you're going to have to be able to pick and choose, your best pieces for that particular performance. It's the way musicians put together their concerts, and you need to know when to slot in the new piece, and how many things you do that are hits, all that kind of stuff. So I like individual pieces that I can just do. I could do one piece and it's fine. If I could do 3 pieces in a row and it's fine. I could do a full show, it's fine. I could do, a complete stage show, and everything is still going to work. There are other schools of thought. I do believe in them, but I find it a challenge, and that is where they're interlocking. Matt King is the best of it, where he does foreshadowing. He has a piece that does this, and it foreshadows a thing that does that. The issue, though, is that he has to do the same show over and over again. He can't add in too many different things. He can slot in, maybe one new piece and try it, but he's working with something that is going to come back. He's something disappears here, then there's 2 more things, and then it reappears there in a place you didn't expect, and then the Fig Newton comes out, here and there, and all. It's interwoven.
Makes for an amazing show.
Yeah, right. I am, no diss on him at all. His is the best of that I've ever seen. But to get to that point, I know for a fact, because he worked amusement parks, that he has done the development of that thousands of times before it happened to gel together into what it is now, and he's still now just tinkering with it. So for me, I work really, really hard, very, very hard, but I work really hard on one piece at a time, and I feel good because I can do slots.
You really just go from one piece straight into the next, right?
And that's why I do that. You don't need a segue. If your piece stands alone, you don't need a segue. If you've ever listened to to Dave Matthews live at Red Rock.
We just did on our trip to Virginia.
For 4 hours, going up and 4 hours coming back. You don't need a transition. You just do a piece. And then you go, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. Hope everyone's having a pleasant evening. And then you do the next piece. That's it.
Wonderful example. And Napoleon, what do you say on this topic?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, going back to what Dan said, if you're doing particularly something that's very audience interactive, the audience keeps your show fresh or the routines fresh, because you don't know. I work at the humble local level of children's entertainment and comedy magic. So for me, I'm very much about connecting with the audience. Of course, an audience of 5 to 10 kids is very different from an audience of 500 or an audience of older people. So of course, naturally the show is going to be fresh because you're walking into these different situations and you're trying to tailor what you're doing to the best of your ability to the audience, to deliver the best show you can for the audience that's in front of you. In terms of, if I was doing, say, more of a manipulation act or something to music, I think obviously it would be more like doing a dance where technically everything remains the same, perhaps. And, maybe you feel that the audience is different on a particular night in a particular theater. Maybe you feel they're more warm to you, or they're more cold to you, or they're more rowdy, or they're more disturbed. But I think it's very different if you're a patter act and you're really participating with the audience. In terms of transitions, I mean, I think you got to move quickly from one thing to the next, but have a good hook line. It doesn't have to be a hook line. It could be a question. Who wants to win some money is a great transition. And I think also it's thinking about the quality of your routines. Is there enough variety in what you're doing? You could do a demonstration of skill, and then you could do a stunt or some like death-defying challenge, or then you could do a wager or a game. Then you could do a storytelling piece. So it's almost like thinking about the different types of routines you're doing, irrespective of what the prop is. What type of thing are you doing? And again, that comes back to structure and perhaps thinking about palate cleanses in your show. You might do a very strong first half of comedy, and then you might want to make sure that you don't peak too soon in the middle of the show by raising the energy or shifting the energy. Sorry, my cat's meowing out there, but you might want to kind of do a routine to music, and that resets the audience so that you can go back down again and come up for the end of the show. I think, again, it's about thinking about, it's thinking about in a macro level and then thinking individually on each routine. And then it's really just about playing it live theater and going, well, what works here? Does this juxtaposition work better? Or, should I do 2 sucker tricks in a row? Is that going to alienate the audience? Or would it be good at that point in the show to reestablish that I'm very skillful and then go into something that maybe shows me slightly, I get a comeuppance, maybe I'm a bit more hapless. And again, that's like playing with character and playing all these different things. But it's fun. It is fun to kind of experiment. What can I do here for the audience, or how can I play with their perceptions? Sorry.
I think a bed of cats, whining and crying is great for a kids show. Wonderful. All right, Chris, we'll go to you on this transition piece.
Yeah, first off, I'll keep it short because everything tonight was, and I was telling Braided and Napoleon, Dan, Sarah, that this is like a master class that, you really got to absorb all this. And again, to reiterate, if people are out there watching, I would definitely rewatch this episode. I learned a lot, Braden. I'm a Jeff McBride, a student, and he's ingrained in me that everything has to have meaning, and I just cannot imagine magic without that, from movement to script. It's just really difficult for me to function, I guess. And I think what Sarah and Dan also brought up that really kind of summarized what, at least how I perform is that it's a conversation with you and the audience sometimes. And that it has to seem organic. And I think that's important, because if you just go up there and you just do the tricks, then it just becomes tricks. And I think Eugene Berger always used to say, magic is not just about tricks. It is a way. And I guess we all have to interpret what that way is, at least at that time and that moment. But that's my contributions there, Braden. So thank you.
Well said. Now we'll go to final thoughts. We'll start with Napoleon, then we'll go to Sarah and Dan for their final thoughts before we wrap up tonight's show. But it's been amazing. Napoleon, what are your final thoughts on Magic as Theater?
Yeah, I think I would say, well, what role can the audience play in your show? You know, or the structure of your show? Obviously, you can have trick interactivity where they participate in a trick and they give you a card that you have to find, or they, you know, you ask for a number and they suggest a number. But can you make them part of the show in a narrative way? Can you make it so that they choose the structure of the show, or at least it looks like they choose the structure of the show? And I think that's the idea I would, aside from everything else that we've said tonight, I think that's the thing that I would really like to put out there, this idea of like how much can you involve the audience in what you're doing so that it seems like they're directing what you're doing, even if it's only an illusion that you're giving them this control. I think it would make it very they would have great ownership in the show and a strong connection to it.
Wonderful. All right, Sarah, go ahead. What's your final thought here?
Just that it's really important to ask yourself why. As you're doing everything you're doing, ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you're getting ready to put together a show and you're making those choices about what effects you're going to perform, ask yourself, why am I performing this? And does it make sense in the overarching context, and why? So that question is just really, really important from every single level. So always be asking yourself why. I also want to throw in, if you want to know more about Magic as Theater, we have an awesome convention coming up that we're doing, MagicCon. We mentioned it earlier. And we have actor Joshua Lozoff. He was on Cheers and Clueless, and he's going to be doing an acting techniques for the magicians class. And so I'm really excited about that. And then we're going to have several others there. Dan Harlan is going to be performing and lecturing. We have Luna Shimada, myself, Alon New. And so we have a really great group of magicians coming around to teach. And they're all magicians that are so into looking at magic as an art form and as theater, and have really done amazing things in their own show to put together these theatrical pieces. And so it's going to be a really great time for us to all get together and talk about magic as theater. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. So the convention again is MagicCon. It's going to be Friday, August 19th through Sunday, August 21st. It's going to be in Clayton, North Carolina. And you can get to it by going to themystictower.com/MagicCon is one way you can get the tickets. And it's going to be amazing. So get your tickets and head on out there and see everybody. So thank you, Sarah and Dan. And who do we have there? Who's our guest?
This is Potato.
Potato.
Yeah.
Thank you, Potato.
Yeah,
Potato's a Pomeranian that was raised by Luna Shimada.
Oh,
and Luna was kind enough to let us have Potato after she was done. Luna breeds Pomeranians.
Yes.
If you want a Pomeranian, oh man, this is the best dog. I'm saying this while our other two dogs are licking my legs. They're great dogs too, and they are great dogs.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sarah and Dan and Napoleon as well. And Chris, we have another wonderful show in the books. We can't be happier than we are today to talk about Magic as Theater. So with that, I guess we'll sign off. He's Chris Harris-Faust. I'm Braden Daniels, and we encourage you to keep thinking about magic.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Hope to see you in all.